Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hello, David.
And I'd like to welcome the wisest hockey fans in the world, the people who listen to the Cult of Hockey podcast. We're lucky to have this group of listeners. Bruce, today we're going to talk about the Oilers draft record. And you know what? I was just looking at the Oilers draft record, and on a certain level, it's almost impossible to talk about this because we just don't know.
Yeah.
We still don't know. Like everyone in Edmonton was excited about, Evan Bouchard. But how excited were we about Kyler Yamamoto and Jesse Puljujarvi? And both those players, we were a lot more bullish on them a year ago and way more bullish on them before that in their draft years. And so we have a couple drafts, 2017 on, let's say, last three drafts where you can't really say much. Yamamoto hasn't trended well, at least not last year, but Samorukov and Maximov from that year are. And it's just really hard, I guess. That's my first point that I want to make. And this is the problem in evaluating scouts. You don't really know how they've done. You can have a guy on staff for 5 years and he looks like he's been a horrible failure. But then all of a sudden, one of those players becomes a really good NHLer, and then another one does, and then another one does, and suddenly he looks differently a few years later. I mean, Håkan Andersson, the famous scout of the Red Wings, there was 3 years in a row in the mid 1990s, Bruce, when the Red Wings got nothing. 3 years in a row, nothing out of those drafts. But then that's sandwiched on the other end of that is like Zetterberg and Datsuk. And before that, there's all kinds of good players.
Litany of superstars. Lidstrom and Fedorov in the same draft.
Yeah, and Holmstrom, was that his name? That he got forward there for Detroit, who was so good, and all kinds of other guys. So 3 years in a row, though, they got nothing.
Yeah. Well, you talk about how excited we were. I mean, how excited were we for Jim Playfair? Right? And now he's an Oiler again. So hey, maybe that pick's gonna pan out after all.
Peter
how excited! Yeah. Frankie LaRue. There was lots of players.
Metcalf.
I think we're now at the point, David. We're looking down the fullness of the list that it's deeper than I can remember.
Okay,
I think we do have collected by various means, not all drafts, but mostly drafts, a pretty reasonably tantalizing group of close to 20 players. I think at least have a chance.
It's Bruce. So we've been at the Cult of Hockey rating the draft picks since you started it, I believe, in 2011.
Yes.
And you did kind of an all-star, like the top 5 guys in the next 5 all-star teams.
3 teams of 6. 3 teams of 6. Goalie, 2 D, 3 forwards.
And after that, from about 2012 to about, I think Jonathan Willis was writing for about 5 years with the Cult, and you and he and I voted most of those years, and we've expanded the voting. And this year, we were lucky enough to have Jim Matheson, the my veteran colleague, Hall of Fame reporter for the Edmonton Journal, participated, and he voted. Sean Patrick Ryan, who does absolutely outstanding work rating prospects in the OHL. Kurt Levins, yourself, and me, we all voted. And without giving away who finished first or the ranking, because we're going to be rolling that out over the next month and writing detailed profiles of the top 25 players. For the first time, Bruce, when you look at the players who are rated first, second, and third in our prospect series, the guy the Oilers took number 1 overall, Philippe Broberg, he isn't in that group. So what that means is that there's real depth at the top, and that one of the reasons the guy wasn't the first pick was always rated usually first overall is because the guy taken first and rated first overall the previous year was in the NHL.
Yeah, it was already off the prospects list and in the NHL list. So
that almost always happened. This is the first time where you have guys who are taken with first picks, Bouchard and Yamamoto, who are still prospects, who haven't yet been rushed into the NHL, although Yamamoto was kind of rushed in the NHL, but then rushed back out of the NHL. but they're still prospects. They're still seen as prospects on our list. And so Broberg, he didn't shoot right to the top of the list, which has happened all the time. So that shows right there, there's a different kind of developmental path, at least for our top prospects with Evan Bouchard. I think they handled the Bouchard situation pretty well last year.
Yeah, Darnell Nurse, he'd be about the last one. He was certainly in the top three, if not second. Seems to me he was
second.
He would rank behind Clefbaum his first year, and Clefbaum had been in the team for a while. And then he ranked behind Draisaitl, and then he ranked behind McDavid, who were, just the latest examples of new first-round picks. But they actually kept him on the prospects list for 3 straight years, which is rare. But what we're looking at on the list at the moment is a number of players who've been in the organization for 2, 3, 4 years, and a cluster that are just turning pro now are going to be, becoming presumably Bakersfield Condors in the 2019-20 season. And who knows? I mean, maybe they'll be in the NHL partway through the year. But there's
how about this, Bruce? William Lagesson. He's been on. This is his 6th year on the list, and the good news is he's trending up. And Ethan Bear, his 5th year. Caleb Jones, his 5th year on our list.
Yes.
So finally, we're in this weird position with the Oilers, and I don't think it's really sunk in. But there's some good young defensemen who deserve to be in the NHL, or real shots at the NHL, and Jones, Lagesson, and Bear, who have been developed essentially the right way. They've been left to over-ripen in the junior hockey and in the AHL and in the European leagues. And it's the first time that's happened that I can remember in such a long time with the Edmonton Oilers. When was the last time? Maybe in the early 2000s, some guys like Stoll and Horkoff kind of came up through the minors.
Yeah, but I mean, they weren't top first-round picks, though. So
neither are Lagesson, Barron, Jones either. So
this is true. Yeah, we're
so Tyler Benson's like people thinking, well, he's not really ready for the NHL. I hear that, but this is his 4th year on the list. He's had 3 years now. Some of those were injured, so injury the years for him, but he had a fantastic year in the AHL. It doesn't. When you look at the history of forwards, Bruce, coming out of the AHL, you don't need to be in the AHL 2 or 3 years if you're a forward who's getting a point a game. Doesn't seem to help you becoming a good NHLer. Either. If you've had that kind of year as a 20-year-old in the AHL, the really good sign you're ready for the NHL. Like there's not a better sign, and you can keep him there, and you might have another really good year. But it's not apparent to me that it makes you any better as a player. You're already the player you're going to be as an attacker. And it's time for Tyler Benson to make the Oilers if he's going to be a top 6 NHL forward, is the truth of the matter. And the same probably goes for Cooper Marody. If he's going to be a top 6 forward in the NHL, it's going to be, he had that great year as a 21-year-old. It's going to be now. So,
yeah, well, he's legitimately close, Tyler Benson. I think, no matter how you cut it. I mean, he's deservedly up near the top of the prospect pool. But, I mean, that's one class of players. Benson, Jones, you mentioned Ethan Bear, Marody, Yamamoto, that have now some pro experience that should be percolating up to the top. And then you have that whole nother layer of guys. I mean, this year, both Evan Bouchard and Dmitry Samorkov are going to be playing full-time pro after dominating the OHL last year, both of them. That's a couple of exciting prospects to add. But the good news is that because there's a layer of guys above them, there's no reason, unless they absolutely crush it and make it on their own merit as being too good to hold back, then great. But it's not like, well, they got to get them in there because there's nobody else. Well, we got rid of Andrei Sekera, so we got to put a 19-year-old kid in there. They have 21 and 22, and even as you say, William Lagesson, what's he, close to 23 by now?
23, yeah.
And you've got, layers of options. And in fact, we're moving out Andrei Sekera and creating a roster spot breaks a logjam. I mean, those guys have been down there and they've been looking up and saying, geez, that's that same top six we've been looking at for the last 3 years now, and they're still there. How the hell are we ever going to get a chance? Well, now they see that chance. So I think that's sort of the silver lining on the Andrew Sekera buyout cloud.
They had to do it, Bruce. They had to move out one of their veteran D-men to
Mm-hmm.
as a normal part of development. You
Mm-hmm.
can't keep saying to Jones and Lagesson and Bear, like, oh, maybe next year. Like, you
Yeah.
could say that up until now, but this is the year for
Yeah.
Caleb Jones. He's ready. And Lagesson, I think, is in the same boat. Like,
Close. Yeah.
it's time. Like, I think it's actually time for William Lagesson in that either he will be an NHL player, Bruce, or he won't. But another year in the AHL really isn't going to make the difference for him. He's
Mhm.
had that. Like, either he can do it or he can't. Like, he's
Mhm.
at that point in his career where he's got to show what he's got, and maybe he doesn't have it. But another year in the AHL is not going to make a difference for him. I don't believe. And frankly, the same goes for Ethan Bear. Does he have it or does he not have it? We'll know. Like, I'm guessing with Lagesson and Bear, it's a bit more iffy. With Jones, I'm pretty sure that he does, but they're ready to give whatever they have as the NHLers, and another year in the AHL is not going to make a difference for them in terms of being pro players. Bruce, I would say one more thing about the draft list that we're looking at. Like, in past years, like players like Ryan McLeod and
Mhm.
Raphael Lavoie, I think would be right near the top of our list, like second
Mhm.
round draft picks who are quite promising. But
If we even had such a player, but yes,
yeah,
they would be.
they're kind of in the teens now. They're in this kind of second rung of and this is another sign finally. So I mean, Chiarelli deserves, especially for this last year of work as GM, like all kinds of criticism. Like, he just was a disaster. Maybe
Mhm.
obviously throughout there was some terrible moves, except for his first year, he did okay, give or take the Griffin Reinhart trade. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that's
to
gonna
give him
say.
some credit, he's the person who put in place the scouting staff.
Mhm.
Seems to have, and again, we don't know how Bouchard and Yamamoto and Broberg and some of these guys are going to turn out, but seems to have done a pretty good job assembling some depth in the Oilers prospect pipeline. So it's kind of a relief, like, to have this finally. This looks like a real NHL franchise with a future in terms of graduating players to the NHL finally.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, graduating to the AHL, I mentioned Bouchard and Samorikov. Well, they also have coming through this year Kirill Maximov, Ryan McLeod, again turning pro. But the whole idea of uh, promoting people is that you have to also make space for these young guys on the minor league team. You can't bury them on the third defense pairing and fourth line because there's other guys, too many guys ahead of them that are stuck in place. So ideally, you have some guys coming in, some new talented kids moving into their old spots, and plenty of ice time for everybody. In an ideal world.
The same goes at forward, Bruce. So let's say the Oilers
Yeah,
don't graduate any forwards. Let's say
yeah,
the
exactly.
Oilers have on their farm team from last year, there's Tyler Benson, Kyler Yamamoto, Cooper Marody, Joe Gambardella, Patrick Russell, and Malone. Russell and Malone being older players. But there's a number of players there
And
who should be
Josh
challenging,
Curry.
and Josh Curry, who should be challenging for NHL jobs this coming year.
Mm-hmm.
And if a couple of them don't make it, well, then what opportunity is there for Maximov and McLeod to get the playing time on the second line and on the power play units, the PK that they need in Bakersfield? A couple of those guys have to make the Oilers.
Yeah.
They've got to, for the system to function,
Yeah.
you've got to graduate people. So now it seems like there's almost this reverse. Well, we can't rush players. So that means Tyler Benson should make it. And the Oilers never get anything good from the farm. So we can't count on Gambardella and Russell. But actually, you have to count on one of Benson or Marody making it and one of Gambardella or Russell making it, or you just clog things up so badly that your system's not functioning properly. So we could go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, there's got to be a payoff. I mean, last year we had very little coming out of the farm, and last year was an investment year at the minor league level. So many guys in their first year. I mean, Marody and Benson both made the all rookie team.
Yeah.
And they had Shane Starrett, who's an interesting prospect in his own right between the pipes. Uh, but they had to uh, uh, now this year they've got those guys with that 1 year under their belt, or 2 years in the case of Caleb Jones, Ethan Bear, some of the defensive group, that they're much closer to being ready. And it's hard to say at this point it's going to be this guy and that guy. I mean, we can guess Caleb Jones, Tyler Benson, but what you need is one guy from this group, one guy from that group, one guy from the other group, as you basically pointed out.
Yeah, off this prospect list that we've put together, I would like to see 3 guys make the Oilers. And of course, Patrick Russell and Malone aren't on this list, but I would include them. So out of all those guys on Bakersfield and all their prospects, 3 guys, I think that would be a sign that the system's working, that they're clearing space in Bakersfield, that they're developing them properly in Bakersfield, and that the Oilers are getting what they need from their farm system. That's a pretty good haul if you can get 3 guys on your team, especially if one of them or 2 of them eventually move into your top 6 forwards, or top 7 forwards, or top 4D. But Benson and Jones have that potential, I think, to be that kind of player who move there. And if one of them does, then that's been a good year of development, because you need every year in those key 12 positions on your team, number 1 goalie, 4D, 7 forwards, you need one new guy every year. So the Oilers, I'm not saying Jones or Benson have to be that guy this year, but they have to move into that eventually. And
well, I think that's one thing that's maybe a little different, is that there won't be the expectation of the new young kid to not only make the team, but to make the first line.
Well, there is with a forward, unfortunately.
Play huge minute. Well, yeah.
So on defense, you're right, Bruce. Yeah, on defense, you're right.
Jones makes the team, it'll be on the 3rd pairing.
Correct, and that's really good, isn't it? Like how we have not seen that in a decade with the Oilers, right? Where that guy was, we probably last saw it with maybe like Tom Gilbert coming in, and they had a fairly deep team, so he wasn't expected to be in the top 4.
But he was.
Well, they had a pretty good D there for a while.
And he was one of them.
And he was one of them. They had, in 2008-09, they still had a fairly good defensive unit, which they frittered away. And but you're right. So Jones is coming in a kind of an ideal situation where he should be playing bottom pairing minutes, or Lagesson, Joel Persson will also be competing. It's a little tougher for Benson and Yamamoto and Marody, because if they show anything right in preseason, it's going to be boom. You're on the top line, boy. Get her done. And how does that work out usually? The ideal thing for Benson, so I think when I talk about Benson being ripe, what I mean he's ripe for making the 3rd line. Okay.
Yeah.
He's ripe for being, and Cooper Marody, he is ripe to play on a 3rd line in the NHL. Both these guys. Yamamoto might, if he hadn't been injured, we might be saying the same thing, right? Because he did well in the AHL last year when he wasn't hurt.
I think he's got a shot.
So these guys are all ready for the 3rd line. Just the problem is the Oilers have 2 massive holes in maybe more than 2, 3 massive holes in their top 6, and so the second one of these guys, maybe that'll be okay. Maybe Tyler Benson's going to be able to slot in,
maybe,
and play with McDavid or Draisaitl. But man, I hate even. It's kind of like I had a little vibration in my chest saying that, a tremor of fear, because how many times have we seen that? Frack, it's just been a disaster. Disaster with just the fact that job is open, and a guy like Jesse Puljujarvi apparently thinks he should have that job and is dissatisfied with the Oilers because he didn't get it. I mean, that's the problem right there. If there had been veteran players there, he wouldn't have had that thought in his head, and he would have thought, maybe I'll stay in Europe for a year and develop properly.
Yeah, well, I can't get past last year when they had the big, huge gaping hole at right wing, and they had in the preseason Ty Ratty, Kyle Yamamoto, Jesse Puljujarvi scored 15 goals in the preseason. 15 goals in preseason, and the same 3 guys combined to score 9 goals in the regular season. I mean, that's even by Oilers standards, that's kind of off the charts. I mean, there only was, what, 8 exhibition games and 80 regular season games?
And I thought, Bruce, for sure, one of those guys, at the end of preseason, I was thinking, okay, what are the chances all three of these guys are going to just stuff it? But that's what happened. And I'm still a little bitter, honestly, about what happened with Ratty. I think he was on his way to being a 15 to 20 goal scorer in the NHL, and then he got hurt, bumped off the top line, and of course they got to get Leon back there. And then Hitchcock comes in, and he's got no time for the player, really. I don't think he was his cup of tea.
Well, he's on his way now. He's on his way to Yaroslavl. Going to join Craig McTavish's team.
And I understand that McT was always his big booster in the organization. But he was always the guy that went to bat for Ratty and wanted him signed and thought he could be a player. And I think from what I saw,
McT he could have been a player.
And I just wish he could have had more little, I just have this sense that just if a few bit better puck luck, better luck with injuries, then he would have made it, but not to be. So let's just end off, Bruce. There's the final layer of prospects when you get past when you get to like below 15, 16, 17, 18, and we go all the way down to the mid 30s. There's some interesting players in there as well, and there's a couple. There's Konovalov, the Russian goalie, and two American defensemen, Kemp and Kesselring, who are both in U.S. college hockey.
Yeah.
Next year, is Kesselring next year? Or has he got another year in the USHL?
I think he's just going now to.
I'm not sure. Both of those guys, Bruce. What do you think of those? We'll be writing about them, but that's another. Look, if someone said to me, "Do you think Phil Kemp? What are the odds of Phil Kemp or Michael Kesselring being, let's say, one of those two being in the NHL 3 years from now, one of those two, or 4 years from now?" And I would say it's a coin flip. I think one of those guys is between one of those two guys. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a decent NHL defenseman in kind of the Matt Green mold. If there is that kind of player still in the NHL, if there's a job for that kind of player, maybe there isn't, but that's the kind of that's how they project. They're big, tough, right shot demon, not fantastic skaters, but they really smart. So there's some prospects there as well, is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Yeah, Kesselring's going to Northeastern this year.
Okay.
After 2 years in the USHL, or a year and a half, I guess, in the USHL. Last year he had a way better second half than first half. He got traded partway through the year. And I know he really grabbed your eye in Billy Moore's Cup. And he grabbed my eye all week. And last year, same thing. Both Kemp and Kesselring just struck me as being, these are long shots, projects, years off. But guess what? They've got a few years because they're going the NC2A route. Now, the sad fact is that on our rankings, the bottom of it is cluttered with NC2A type draft and college prospects that are kind of spinning their wheels down there. And one of the things I want to do is I want to look at the past years and see where the NC2A players stack up on our ratings compared to other players. And I think typically there's a lot of them at the bottom, and typically those guys are at the bottom for a reason, because they didn't turn into anything.
Yeah, we had some high hopes for players like Graham McPhee. John Marino kind of went sideways. He didn't get better. Apley Rasanen and McPhee just both went down. Matthew Cairns is yet to do much. So there's a lot of players that we had a little bit of hope in, kind of like what we have now for Kemp and Kesselring, and instead of trending up. But by the time Michael Kesselring gets to the NHL, Bruce, he's probably going to be about as tall as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I was just going to say, he's pushing 7 feet now, isn't he?
On his skates, he is. He's almost Chara big, man. Like, he's big. Was the biggest player at the Oilers dev camp, and he moved very well. So good for Michael Kesselring.
That's the thing. Like, he can move, and he's his stick isn't an anti-magnet to pucks like sometimes you see with some of the bigger, clumsy guys, especially ones still growing into their bodies. But he and the puck were on good terms. It was nice to see.
He was the surprise of the camp, and a very pleasant surprise. And I think I tweeted at the time, like, if you didn't know any of these players and you went to that day's rookie game, the 3-on-3 game that he had and someone said that big tall guy out there who's scoring all the goals and making all the plays, he's got a bit of grit and hustles like hell. He was Oilers' first pick this year. And if someone had told you that and you didn't know anything, you would think, oh yeah, that makes sense. That kid can go. He's a player. So now a few people objected when I said that, and they said, no, he's too slow. But that's how I saw it. Like, I mean, it's not like he was like a rocket ship out there and that much better than everybody else, but man, he was good. So a little promising indicator for Michael Kesselring. So Bruce, you're going to be starting off the series, and
we've got to look at the depth guys. Beyond 25, which we got about a dozen guys that we're going to just do brief synopses of. Obviously, we're not really forecasting NHL futures for anybody in the bottom third of this list. But at the same time, just sort of an update on who they are, where they played and what they did last year, where they're going to play this year, how far out they are in terms of how many years before they even enter the picture in some cases. So those will just be briefer, as we've traditionally done every year. And then we'll start with our countdown at number 25 and work our way up eventually to number 1.
Alrighty. And as I say, Bruce, for this, on the players on this list, it covers about 5 Oilers draft years. And so what we need to see is 5 players on this list become in those big dozen positions on the NHL team, your number 1 goalie, your top 4D, and your top 7 forwards. So we need 5 guys on this list to eventually become that. And when I look at this list, I think this is it's not a bad bet. It's not a terrible bet. That's going to happen. And I just want to go back just quickly. I'm going to go just look at the 2012 list and see if they got 5 players on that list. And if my internet was working, I could quickly give you an answer on that. But
Yakupov, Schultz.
There we go.
They would
let's
have
go
been
back.
Let's
just do one of these lists. Oh, there's going to be a little bit of pain here, Bruce. Okay, Nail Yakupov at number 1.
Yep.
Oscar Klefbom. So they got 1. There's 1. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Justin Schultz, number Klefbom was 3. Justin Schultz was number 2. So they got 2. Schultz and Klefbom, but not for the Oilers. Schultz. So the Oilers, that's a fail, I guess, for the Oilers. Gernat, Marinson, Pitlick, Musil, Reeder, Buns, Tubert, Roy, Dylan Simpson, Curtis Hamilton, Mitch Moroz, Alex Plant. That's the rest of the top 15. And that's a whole lot of pain right there for the Edmonton Oilers. Not one of those guys became, for Oilers or for any other team, big dozen players, top 12 players.
Toby Reeder was, he at least became an NHLer, at least.
Third line.
On other teams.
Here's the one that really is the killer. Mm-hmm. Number 16, Eric Gustafsson.
Oh, man. You know what? For where he was coming from, that's a high ranking.
That is.
Like, we did have him sort of tagged as being a decent prospect. Like, he's not number 30 or 25. He's behind the sort of high draft pedigree guys and right there. And I know young Willis and I saw him at the development camp, and we both were very impressed. And that's ancient history now because the Oilers changed GMs and the new guy didn't sign him. And now he scored. He got 60 points last year. 60
it's
points.
Disgusting that talk about a mistake Charlie made. Like, it pales in some ways the Reinhardt trade pales in comparison to not signing Eric Gustafsson. And I don't know if that was him or McTavish at the end. Like, who didn't make the call, because it was kind of right in that moment where it
was McTavish who didn't sign Gustafsson.
Okay.
Because that was 2012 that he was on the list, right?
Yeah. Rounding out the list, Daniil Zharkov, Jujhar Khaira, Brandon Davidson, Kyle Bigos, Taylor Fedun, Sami Perhonen, Antti Tervainen, Philip Cornet, Chris Vandeveld, Abney Arcabello, Iwanek, Connor Jones, Pels, Rahala, Boomagan, Byers, House, Laligia, Martindale, McCarron, and Tuomaya, a goalie.
I count 5 guys in there that had some kind of NHL career.
But not just one guy, Bruce,
Mm-hmm.
on that entire list is
Mm-hmm.
with the Oilers in a top 12 position. So
Mm-hmm.
there's 3 guys. Schultz, if we had just kept Schultz, Gustafson, and Clefbaum, I'm not going to swear, but I really want to swear.
We would have better offense from the defense.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is the story of the Oilers.
Mm-hmm.
And the number 1 guy, of course, didn't pan out either.
Right.
So Nail Yakupov. And they just, on this new list, they need to get it right. They need to get 5 guys off that list on the Oilers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we can see it's a really interesting balance. You got to draft right, you got to develop them right, and you also have to clear out players on your pro roster right to give them space in the right role, not thrusting into the top line or the top pairings, but into a role third line or bottom pairing where they can advance. So it's this very careful balance. And you know what? I think Ken Holland might be good at this part of the game. This might be something that he's pretty strong at. So
I'm liking to hope that Dave Tippett is as well. That he's got a good track record of especially with
Dallas.
Yeah, and just with developing players deeper in the team that at least provided his a good competitive base to his team. I mean, the Oilers' bottom 6 in general needs work, and we're seeing a lot of different approaches as to how to fix that, bringing in pros from other leagues and so on, but also just this feeder system that's got to start paying dividends, as you say. Last year was kind of a fallow year. This year can't be that.
It's interesting, I think they have the right idea. Like they realize that, of course, they have these terrible holes in their top 12 players. They're missing probably one defenseman right now. They have kind of a stopgap in Chris Russell in the top 4, and then they're missing 2 or 3 forwards, 3 forwards from their top 7 that they need, a 3C and two wingers. But to give them credit, they're trying to fill with some Europeans, Persson and Gaetan Haas and Joachim Nygaard, and so that might prevent them from thrusting Benson, into a position like with Nygaard there. Maybe the pressure will be on Nygaard in the top to make it on the second line, and that's less. You're not crushing the confidence. Nygaard's not going to get any better as a player. It's now or never, and he has no more development to do really as a hockey player, except as an NHL player. But he doesn't need time, I don't think, in the minors. He's 26, so either he's going to be an NHLer or he's not. And I like filling with that, making that kind of bet, especially a guy who can skate fast, as opposed to thinking Benson's going to get it done in the top 6.
Well, you got to have competition in there, and I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, as we've discussed in another podcast, you find a top 6 winger on the NHL market somehow, trade or UFA or whatever. But that's been a slow starter, shall we say, to this point. But
maybe Justin Williams is going to be signed here.
Yeah, well, at least they do have layers of competition in the sense that they have the fourth liners who are here already, the top veteran line in Bakersfield, the Patrick Russell, Brad Malone, Joe Gambardella, Josh Curry types who are, prime of career, or then some, who are at least in position to compete for a bottom line. Then you got these new Europeans. Well, so you've got layers of competition. Hopefully it won't turn out like last year's right wing competition where everybody looks great in September and then falls off a cliff on October 1st. Man, I'm sick of that movie.
Okay, I'm going to do one last thing, Bruce, before we sign up. I just want to look at Eric Gustafsson's years in Sweden. Like, how the heck did that happen? So was there no indication? So he's drafted in 2012, and he's playing in the. They always change the name of their leagues in Sweden, like the SEL, Sweden 1, Swedish Hockey League. I think he's playing in the top league then. I'm not sure though. And he's kind of got 7 points in 41 games when that year he's drafted, 93rd overall. So that's a pretty. It's not like he's in the top 100 picks. Hell of a draft pick, whoever made that pick. And the next year, he's playing for the same team, and it looks like a different league. It looks like they might have dropped the league.
Yeah, I think the team, Djurgårdens, actually got dropped to the Allsvenskan.
So then he gets 23 points in 49 games, kind of in the AHL version of the Swedish hockey system. The next year, he's with Frölunda in the top league again, and he gets 20 points in 50 games. And then he's with Frölunda again, 29 points in 55 games. That's when the Oilers have got to sign him up. 29 points. He's like 21.
Yeah, he was already, I think he was already gone by then.
29 points in 55 games, 2014-15, you think? I think they could have signed him that year, Bruce, like after that year.
Yeah, well, he wound up in Rockford and then Chicago the very next year, yeah.
I think it's in March. I think it's after that season in Frölunda that he signs in Chicago. Well, we can Google it, or we can find out quickly. But so it looks like he was developing well in Sweden, and should have been signed after his, when he was 20 years old.
Well, he was 20 when they drafted him. Don't forget, he was a mature draft choice. Yeah. So he should have been ahead of the curve at that point. But whatever happened, it didn't get done. Even in Chicago, he played 41 games his first year over here. And then the next year, he spent the entire year in Rockford. And even the next year, he spent the first chunk of the year in Rockford. It's only in the last year and a half that he's been a full-time NHLer. But boy, has he ever blossomed.
So, Bruce, he was signed April 30th, 2015 in Chicago. So he had that really good. He's drafted when he's 20. He's 22 years old. He has a really good year for Frölunda. And he doesn't sign with the Oilers. He signs with Chicago at the end of it. And you know what, Bruce? The Oilers just lost a player, Evan Polai, to the St. Louis Blues. I understand he signed a contract, pro contract. And Stauffer's comment was, well, good for him. He got a pro contract. He should have got a pro contract in Edmonton, Bruce. That was just money sitting on the table. Like, he's got a 30% chance, I think, of being a useful bottom line NHL player, but maybe a really useful one. And a big, tough winger who really took off last year in development, who can skate. He's a fast straight line skater and a little bit of skill. And why the Oilers didn't sign that guy? Maybe he didn't want to sign with the Oilers. I don't know, but I don't like. And maybe there's something I don't know about him, something they didn't like. But I wish they would have signed him based on his play, based on what I saw of him last year in Bakersfield. I don't get that, and I think that was a mistake. And I wonder if he's somebody who's kind of slipped in between the cracks of regime change, like Gustafsson did, perhaps, eh?
Well, he was on an AHL contract with Edmonton, with Bakersfield, and so he's Sean Day was in the same boat, and the Oilers did sign Sean Day, and of course
I would have picked Polai over Day.
And then of course they did re-sign several veterans from Bakersfield, so it's not like the Holland came in and ignored what was going on down there, but obviously a decision was made on Polai, and another team valued him higher. And I wish him well. I like him as a player.
Early on, Stauffer sent a signal that Polai was not going to sign with the Oilers, and he was never talked about. Like, they talked about who was coming back, and he was not on the list. I think that was a signal. It was right after the season. I couldn't figure it out because I thought he played quite well in the playoffs. But so who knows? Maybe they just made up their mind. Maybe they didn't want him, or maybe he had made up his mind. He wanted to try somewhere else. So that can happen too. Like, if, there's choice. Players can choose to sign or not to sign, right? So it's not always management's fault, but
especially guys on AHL contracts, I got a little more freedom. That the team doesn't have restricted rights on him the same way as they would on say Joe Gambardella. So
the clock must have run out with the Oilers on Gustafsson in 2015.
Yeah, I think because he was a 20-year-old draft, I think they had a 2-year window to sign him, and they didn't. And then he had a good year in Frölunda, and Chicago nabbed him right away. So
Rats. 60 points.
60 points, 17 goals. 60 points. Not that the Oilers need a good point man on their power play or anything.
And what does he earn? Probably he's on his
1.2 million, I think, for this upcoming season. And then he's a UFA.
Yeah, then he's a UFA.
So
He'll get $8 billion a year. All right. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for talking.
All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading, everyone.
And in the meantime and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.